Major support for these programs is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting. Additional support is provided by Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, Capital One Bank, Cassidy Turley, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin, Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the Wickoff Group, Urban American, and Ackman Ziff Real Estate, Aerial Property Advisors, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Goldman Properties, Moynihan Group, Muss Development, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Rosewood Realty Group, Terra CRG, Triangle Equities.
The residential market in New York and New Jersey is literally on fire. We're in the summer, and I'm not sure if the streets are so hot or the sales prices and the rents are this high. So today I've assembled 4 very intelligent, bright individuals, maybe I'm lying a little bit, who are literally going to provide their insight on how they see the market, the residential market in the region. My guests, they include Martin Nussbaum, who's the CEO of Silverstone Property Group. From the brokerage side, Shimon Shakori, who is the president of Ariel Property Advisors. From New Jersey, I have 2 New Jersey guys on this side. I have Adam Mermelstein, who's the managing member of Treetop Development. And last but not least, my friend Philip Eisenberg, who's the chairman, CEO, and the person who's been in the business longer than most of us of Urban America. So you've seen the market. I got you, I got a couple of younger guys. Are we at 2007? Are we at the highest level that you've seen in rents, residential rents? Where do you see this, Philip?
Well, I don't think we're at 2007 because that was an amount of exuberance to some extent fueled by the amount of leverage that you could put on these buildings that caused people to make big mistakes. Today, the banks won't lend you as much on these properties. The rates are good, as good as we've ever seen. And we're not even relatives of these banks.
Wait a second. So let's look at that. In your career, which has spanned over 4 decades, have you seen rates ever this low?
My father did, not me. No, I haven't seen. I've never seen.
So here's the question: you haven't seen rates this low. You have 2 guys over here who are really doing a great job in running their businesses, building up a residential portfolio, even building construction, other things. What would you recommend? Would you tell them, Martin, Adam, lock into these low rates? Or should you say, maybe the rates are going to go down lower?
Well, I think it depends on the economics of the deal. I mean, if you can borrow at 3.5 and buy something at a 5.5 cap, and even at a 75% leverage, that 5.5 is all of a sudden becomes, 9%, over 9% return. So there's nothing wrong with locking that in.
I love this story about returns. Shimon's a very good broker, investment sales professional. When you take a book that maybe you'd be representing Martin in a sale of a property or someone else, how do you present the book in the numbers? And you know, reserves for, you know, repairs, replacements, vacancy factor. You know, how do you look at that? You know, there's always that opportunity. I know.
Of course. I mean, we look at 4 dimensions really as investment sales brokers. We look at cap rates, gross rent multiples, prices per foot, and prices per unit. And it depends on the asset. I mean, if it's a core asset, clearly you'll see a very high price per foot below 96th Street. You know, prices per foot for larger core assets are sometimes above $1,000, with, you know, corresponding cap rates of 3 to 3.5. When you talk about value add opportunities below 96, again, it's more like in the 5 to 6 range, maybe 6 to 7 range. When you go to the boroughs, it's lower. So it depends on the asset, the location, and the upside in each one of these assets.
Now, Adam, you've been recently, prior to the show, we were talking about certain of the acquisitions. You've been going north of 96th Street. Well, what's your thoughts? And I know, Martin, you have a number of properties north, but you've recently closed on some of them.
Right.
So tell me your thoughts on how you've looked at the market and why you bought those properties.
At the end of the day, we're value added. We're opportunistic investors who sort of see this, I guess, north of 96th Street as an extension of the Upper West Side. And so we sort of, you know, continue to see it.
So you like West Harlem, as one would
Yes,
say,
we
or Washington Heights, as opposed to East Harlem.
I wouldn't say, I would say that we like West Harlem. Above 145th Street, we sort of shy away from, though.
Okay, so you like the West, and do you believe the rents over there have still ability to increase?
Yeah, I do believe that. Transportation is key there. The apartments are large enough. They were built, you know, many of them were built pre-war. There is new development. There's a lot of, you have CUNY, you have Columbia. You have a lot of development going on in the area that will further push up the rents, we believe.
And I think the rents there are affordable, also on the free market range. If you look at 116th Street, one of the buildings that you bought, you get $35 to $40 a foot in 116. It's about, I don't know, 60% of what you'll get on 102 or 98 on the west side. So it's a lot more affordable for someone to live there, and I think you can get that number.
And I think the other thing that we're doing is we're really improving the asset. We're not just, you know, sort of slapping a coat of paint on and polyurethaning the floors. We're renovating the bathrooms, fully gutting the bathrooms, making them, you know, much more modern. The kitchens get Caesar stone countertops with, you know, really just nice kitchens. And so we're sort of attracting this, not quite luxury, but certainly, you know, this young professional crowd.
Martin?
We started off further downtown and started below 96th Street when we first started buying property. And the reason that we started going uptown is similar to what you were saying, is the cost to live downtown is so astronomical that it's forcing people to go further up. And what you were saying,
You mean rent-wise?
Rent-wise.
But I mean, the cost of living, your personal expenses aren't really different. I mean, the rent is the key.
But that's the key. So the rents, you know, you could be living in an apartment with comparable finishes and comparable hallways and common areas, similar to what you're saying. And you're saying also that you're upgrading the level of finishes, because that's what the renter's demanding now. If you're going to try and achieve the rents that you want to try and achieve in uptown, you know, West Harlem, you need to give them a product that they're used to being in downtown, that they're being forced out of due to the rent increases.
And with so much new development in little spots in these areas, you have to upgrade your finishes in your building if you want to compete with that.
Now, you have the Putnam portfolio. I mean, you have how many units up in the neighborhood that we're just talking about?
Over 3,000.
Over 3,000. So what are the rents in West Harlem today for an apartment?
There's West Harlem and there's West Harlem. We have East Harlem, which is
I know you have East Harlem.
101st to 103rd. We have the units on the Metro North side.
So
And
what
those
are
the rents are we're getting $2,200 for a two-bedroom.
For a two-bedroom.
And put 110th Street, we're getting on 5th. You know, we're getting $3,000 for it.
So would you say that very far east in Spanish Harlem, as one would say, or over there, it's a lower rent? The best rents are for a landlord are in West Harlem. or that section.
Well,
of
Fifth
Austin.
Avenue is neutral, right? So
No,
you
Fifth
could-
Avenue
but
is
that's-
Fifth Avenue. You know, I remember writing an article a number of years ago for the Sun, and I said there are three Harlems. There's West Harlem, there's Central Harlem, and there's East Harlem. Ironically, East Harlem begins on Fifth Avenue, going north.
But I think that to your point, Fifth Avenue on the Park and Central Park North are really different than just Harlem. I mean, in terms of anything you look at, in terms of rent pricing, in terms of condo sales there are, you know, about $1,200 a foot plus. So that says something about that neighborhood and the fact that it's on the park.
But here's an interesting thing. I'm talking residential, and I think it's relating to rental. I know that I believe over the last couple of years, you converted maybe one or two buildings to condo.
Right, we did one on 215 West 88th Street, and we did one on 110th and 610 110th Street on Cathedral Parkway there. And we, you know, $1,100 was a number we were shooting for when we did it then. The rents, the sales prices fell away for a while, but it's back up there now. We're getting the numbers we thought we would get a long time ago. You just have to wait it out. But we didn't have that much product anyway because it's a question of turnover.
So here's my question for Martin and Adam. Philip's been in the business. Have you, you know, you could let Shimon, wouldn't be bad, let him sell the properties for you because somebody will be there. How about the idea of converting them to condominiums? What's your thought about that?
I think that depending on the product type that we are buying, we are often buying sort of walk-up or, you know, multi-family type assets that have retail on the ground floor and they're sub 50 unit buildings, where I don't think that the layouts of the units work really well for a condo. Whereas we recently purchased a building that's a, you know, a doorman elevated building, and I think it would be something we would seriously consider once the renovation's complete, because I think it lays out properly and it would ultimately meet the market demands of what's there.
I agree with Martin that, for example, the building that Shimon had sold us back in February, it's on 116th and 7th Avenue. It's a 7-story elevator building. The lobby is, you know, an old grand lobby. It has potential to be a condo building. On the other hand, we bought a portfolio on Amsterdam and Columbus between 105th and 108th, and that portfolio is really 25-footers. There's nothing exciting or sexy about the building, but it's that good New York City rental stock. And it's, you know, the young professionals coming into town for the first time who are looking either for shares. And so it becomes a game of, you know, how many reasonably sized bedrooms can we fit into an apartment with a living room and a kitchen? So
I mean, if you've read Bloomberg's new idea of this 300 square foot apartment, I mean, they'll build it. Now, it's a little...
Will they come?
No, they'll come.
They'll come.
They
No,
will
the-
come.
They'll come.
the-
We have apartments. Just like we have apartments that are 350 square feet that are 2 bedrooms. So I think that there are ways to. They'll come.
That's why you have to keep your body thin. That's
I
why I
know.
lost a little weight.
You know, it's amazing what people were willing to squeeze into to sort of live in Manhattan and in the right areas, and you know, and this is I think what we both do a lot of.
and
Well,
I would.
we have those two towers on 5th and 110th, you know, the Heritage, and on Schomburg Plaza. And there's some weird shaped apartments in there. I mean, I'd like to speak to Grusin and ask him what he was thinking when he built it. But they overlooked the 5th Avenue, and you'd say nobody, more than one person could live in this apartment. And here comes somebody with his partner, girlfriend, whatever, and they're happy as a clam in that small space.
Right.
Now, both of you have properties in New Jersey. I hear from our conversation and from Martin and Shimon, New York City is on fire. Is Newark, New Jersey, is East Orange, is West New York, is Union City having the same situation as Manhattan?
Yes, in many respects. There are some pluses in New Jersey. Maybe I shouldn't tell anybody, but in New Jersey, in West
You
New
know
York,
the show airs all around the world. So
in West New York and Union City, for example, first of all, New Jersey is much more kind to landlords in terms of collections and problems with tenants. And two, when you renovate an apartment in those two cities, you only have to spend $20 for every dollar in rent raise you get. Out with us here in New York, it went from 40 to 60. Right. That's a huge difference, and that changes your ROI. And we do the same things out there that we would do in Manhattan. We got the apartments, put new kitchens in, new bathrooms, new floors, whatever has to be done, go back to the stacks on all the plumbing. But we still can't, we spend it and we get such a better return. In terms of product, there is no product where we are. So when a building or two come on market, the prices go through the roof.
That's Union City and
West New York.
and West New York.
And and North Bergen, yeah.
What about?
I think specifically in the better areas in Essex County, and when I say better areas, I even mean the best blocks of Newark and the best blocks of East Orange, for example, where we own. We've seen prices, I mean, I've been working in these areas for 10 years, and I've seen prices more than double in these neighborhoods. And the reason is primarily because a good landlord puts money into his building, and those are the landlords that sort of, survive the
But
tough.
here's my question. I've done shows on New Jersey, I've done shows on Newark, and even with people involved, they say Newark doesn't have enough amenities, doesn't have enough, really good amenities to bring it in. So people aren't jumping to Newark. It's great schools, medical centers, certain industry. The office
So-
space is not
Right.
there, and so
So I think you're right about the office space. I sort of disagree with that statement as a whole. I think you have to take Newark for what it is. They say it's been an up-and-coming city for probably, 30, 40 years right now. I think probably for the next 10 years it'll continue to be an up-and-coming city. But in the past 3 to 5 years, we've certainly seen development which has been unprecedented in Newark. We've seen Apollo come into Newark. We've seen institutional, partners and joint ventures.
Look, you got the Teachers Village that's going to be being
Right.
built. You have Dinosaur Barbecue that
Right.
recently opened up. You have the
The
Prudential
Prudential
Center.
Center.
No, I'm
It's
not
certainly a work
disagreeing.
in
It is.
progress.
So here's the question, because lots of people watch my show and they want to figure out where's the next opportunity. Is it East New York? Is it Bushwick? Is it Jamaica? Is it South Ozone Park? What do you think?
We just sold in Jamaica,
You sold
in
Jamaica?
Hollis, yeah.
How come?
Well, we had planned to sell those 3 buildings out of the package that we bought back when we first bought it, but the market wasn't right, and we felt we had to do some more work to the properties to get them up to the level. And then
But my question is, look, I always say owners, developers have a mantra, and the mantra is we're in business. We got to buy, we got to sell, we got to do other things. So where's the next opportunity, Nod?
We're spending a lot of time in Brooklyn. Obviously, parts of Brooklyn are already so mature, but we're trying to skirt around those areas. And you said Bushwick, and we love Bushwick. I'm starting to really spend a lot more time on the outskirts of Bed-Stuy that sort of touch on Bushwick and East Williamsburg and that area. Clinton Hill, we're starting to look at stuff as well. So in New York, in Brooklyn, that's the areas that we're focused on. In New York, I'm starting to spend a lot more time sort of looking south of the Lower East Side. We own a fair amount of buildings in Lower East Side, and I think that is just pushing and pushing and pushing.
So what do you mean by south of the Lower East Side?
South of Delancey, south of Canal, all sort of on the east side, underneath the Williamsburg Bridge, underneath and we're looking sort of down by Madison Street, and there's a very big push.
What's your thoughts of Lower Manhattan? Is there any opportunity there?
It's just not a space that I particularly like to transact in.
Adam?
it's tough.
I personally would transact as far as Lower Manhattan. The truth is, my biggest issue with Lower Manhattan is I don't think you have sort of the landscape the residential landscape that you have in other areas of Manhattan. So for example, even once you hit, I mentioned before, below 145th Street, even as you hit above 145th Street, it lends itself to residential growth. I don't think Lower Manhattan sort of lends itself to residential growth in the sense that it's a commercial business district.
But it's interesting. Your points are very well taken. But I remember a couple years ago I did a show in Brooklyn, and I said, how are they going to be able to absorb in downtown Brooklyn 1,955 units? They absorb them, and they're getting higher rents now. And I did a show a couple weeks ago, and I had Jed Walentis on and Doug Steiner, and they're building in downtown Brooklyn. So downtown Brooklyn. Now, what about Bed-Stuy, East New York?
Well, we have stuff.
Queens,
We have stuff in Bed-Stuy in East New York, and we've had them a while, and some of it's Sam Lefrak built, and it does fine. And there's stuff around us that are reasonable buys. You just have to pick your spots. There are some spots.
Shimon?
I think, just to go back to Manhattan for a second, South Harlem, we're below 125th Street, anywhere on Frederick Douglass, 116, 125th, close to the Columbia expansion, 126th Street. These are areas that will change and have changed even through the downturn, and these are areas definitely to look at. I mean, you've bought a substantial amount of properties there over the past year or so, and one of the things you'll see is that the rents are changing and there's velocity, and the fact that Columbia is putting $6.4 billion
There's no question on that.
Broadway is going to
But what
definitely
about,
change.
look, the Bronx is, the Yankees are in the Bronx. Somebody told me they're going to be building a hotel in the Bronx. I don't know what type, but, there is Riverdale, which is the Bronx. What about the Bronx?
It's a lot more aggressive today on the multifamily side than it used to be a year ago. We've seen, I mean, we just sold a $33 million portfolio there. That happened to be a project-based Section 8, so it's financed by, by some subsidies and so on. But the point of the Bronx is cash flow. And that's the difference, I think, between Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, and somewhat in Queens.
So
And-
Manhattan is, there's opportunities. I'm betting on the market in the world. The Bronx, it's show me the actual money, and this is how I am. Maybe I'll have a little increase, but what about, there is a place called Staten Island. Anything ever there?
I don't know much about
I
it.
don't have a visa.
You don't have a visa, okay?
So we just got involved in a building in Staten Island that we got involved in through the debt side of the building, and so I've studied Staten Island a little bit over the last 6 months, and I think it's a very interesting area. There's obviously the views are phenomenal. The transportation is a lot better than I think a lot of people realize it is.
If you work in Lower Manhattan, Staten Island's
It's
great.
phenomenal.
My
And
wife
there's-
used to be in the employment business, and there's a certain situation you couldn't get a young lady who's an administrative assistant to work in Midtown from Staten Island because the commute was too far.
Right.
But for Lower Manhattan, it was great. You got the ferry. It's,
Right.
it's,
And talk about there's not a lot of supply there at all, and I think that's very. I mean, there's no one going into Staten Island and sort of rehabbing buildings or doing ground up. There are a couple of ground up construction jobs that got stuck and have since been worked out, and
Are the
those-
rents lower?
the rents are
Lower
lower,
in Staten Island than they are, say, in Upper Manhattan?
comparable.
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 I would still rather be in Upper Manhattan. I mean,
Mhm.
I guess to each his own.
no.
Well, I think there's more room to move. There's more room to be able to assemble buildings
no,
near each other.
There's a lot of opportunity in Staten Island that it's not as competitive. I wouldn't say it's not competitive, but it's clearly not
less
as competitive.
Here's, a couple weeks ago, I did a show on investment sales, and everyone, unfortunately, the investment sales people certain times are a little overzealous in their conversations and everything. But I hear there are investors from everywhere around the world. What are you seeing?
We see investors from everywhere around the world, but one thing that I'll tell you is that they work through local operators or local partnerships that are created here. And so everybody that sits around this room is, someone that probably benefits from some type of international investor or international fund that's invested in them.
So have these investors come to you, Adam, and you, Martin, recently and said, we'd like to team up with you?
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, Shimon introduced us to a group of Israeli and European investors who we've since done deals with. So they're certainly out there, and they're aggressive.
What type of, are they individuals or are they institutions?
A combination of high net worth and foreign institutions from different parts of the world, not just one part.
The world is you talk to a lot of these investors, the world is, outside of our little bubble of New York City is pretty dangerous right now financially. And I think you're seeing a tremendous flow of capital to safety, so to speak.
So that's interesting, and it relates to the bubble. How are, you buy the property, you put some money into it, you fix it up. How are the banks, who are going to be here next week, how are they reacting to you and to the financing world today? How do you see them? Are they, are they very aggressive? Are they very interested?
I think the banks are relationship driven today. If you have a good relationship with a bank, if you have a good name, a good reputation, the banks are going to look to lend to you. And I don't want to say that they're going to make exceptions, but they're going to look to push the dollars and push their limits if you're known as a good and, sort of a good, honest borrower. At the same time, they want to see you improve the property. If you're buying the
They want to see skin in the game.
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
They want to
More
see
equity than they used
Yeah,
to.
they're not lending as much as they used to, so that's obviously gets them comfortable. And I agree, they're looking for operators who can perform and get through the tougher times.
And I think that's another difference between today and 2007. The operators that you see around are people with a lot of experience, a lot more
Yeah,
experience
but
than before.
you know, there was a different. We briefly got to this subject, and I'll bring it up on next week's show when I talk to the banks. You know, in let's say from 2002 to 2008, any person, many young people, who one was written up in the New York Times last week, a number of young people would go in and say, "I'm smart. I'm going to buy this vacant lot, and I'm going to build an apartment house." Some of them got lucky, and then, as we said before about construction, then the music stopped, and then the bank had a little problem. Do you see that happening today? People saying, "I want to be in the construction business, because I want to be a developer." I mean, and how do the banks look at that?
I think they go back to not lending as much on a loan to cost value, and they're looking for experience.
But I also think that in 2002 and 2003, you didn't have to have experience to do a ground-up development. You could find a piece of dirt. If it quote-unquote made sense, the banks would lend you money. Banks aren't doing that today. They're not just lending money, willy-nilly, just because the deal makes sense if you're not a good operator.
We bought a note from a bank who just did that willy-nilly. And at the end of their $7.5 million construction loan, when they had advanced the $7.5 million, only about $4 million of work had been done. So we bought the note, the $7.5 million note, for $4 million.
And now you're finishing
Put the
the
$4
work.
million. We finished it, and this is in Williamsburg. And by the time we finished it and got the certificate of occupants, all 16 units were rented. Brand new building. And there's more of that out there still, and we looked at a couple of others which we'll buy. And that's just because of what you said, that they would give the money to people who, I mean, today if I went in, and I have experience building, if I went in and I wanted to build a substantial size, they'd say, okay, now who's building it with you?
That's right.
We love you.
That's right.
But you know, who's
you're
building
not,
it with you?
But you're
Who's
not
your partner?
you're not a builder, and they have to look at it in that way.
They didn't then, and that's how they got hurt.
Right, I think the other thing is that they take your personal guarantee a lot more serious today than they did in the past. I didn't even understand, when I used to do development, not that I didn't understand the severity of the personal guarantee, but it was part of doing business. Today,
Look, you might lose your firstborn. No, all joking aside. But I think that the four of you have really given some good insight on the state of the residential market. And since I'm always considered the pessimist, maybe I'll be optimistic. I'd like to thank Martin Nussbaum, Shimon Shakuri, Adel Mermelstein, and Philip Eisenberg. See you next week.
Thank you.